Florida. Thank you for recording. Hitting the streets in Florida and thinking, what, like any business person, I thought, what is something that everybody needs in Florida? Because I had grown to like it. I'd been teaching at the local power school, the nuclear power school, and it was near Disney World. It was Universal had opened or was under construction back then, getting ready to open. And I was like, I kind of like it here. I think I could make a go of it. And so I bought my first house in '86 or '87 in Florida, and my compressor failed on one of my outside heat pumps, like you see on this middle house right here. Some of them have outside heat pumps. You're probably used to seeing those fan style units like this one right here. And it was the middle of the summertime, and it looks like you got some more guests in the lobby there, if I'm understanding it right. Or they may be in the they may be waiting for the wrong thing. At any rate, this condenser has a compressor in it because it uses and this is part of what I'm teaching you. This is a story where I'm actually sharing a little bit about what low temperature heat pumps do. So this heat pump here is shown in the wintertime as absorbing heat from the outside and pumping that into the inside. And it does that using a process called the Carnot refrigeration cycle, which we're going to talk about, which some of you have probably studied. But in any case, this compressor, which is a vapor compressor, which is part of the Carnot refrigeration system, it had failed in the middle of the summer on Labor Day in Orlando, Florida. And so having the skills to do it, I went ahead and got a new compressor and went to replace it. And when I put the new compressor in, one of the telltale signs that a piece of equipment is operating on its ragged edge is looking at the amp draw. And the amp draw of this compressor was over the rated maximum load amps, meaning it was hotter than blue blazes outside. And I was concerned. I said, this compressor is not going to last using this with this high of a load on it. And right then, in my backyard, I had an irrigation pump that did my lawn watering. And of course, it was the middle of the summer, and it kicked on, and the sprinklers started sprinkling the water over the grass. And I said, I wonder what the temperature of the aquifer is. And so I went and checked, and it was 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And meanwhile, it was 97 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And I said, I wonder if I could put in a water to refrigerant exchanger. So I did, and I put in a water to refrigerant exchanger on my outside condenser, and the amp draw dropped from 21 amps at 220 volts to 11 amps. And I said, my goodness, I think I found something that I can sell. Now, it was about 2 months later, because I thought I had invented groundwater cooled air conditioning. It was about 2 months later that somebody came to me and said, Jay, did you know that Oklahoma State University is the home to the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, and they have a curriculum on these types of systems? So what do you think I did? I flew to Oklahoma and took every class they had on geothermal design. And I was trained, if you ever really get into this geothermal design, and looking at the history, Jim Bowes was the director of their geothermal efforts over at OSU, and he was still teaching the class back in 1990 when I finally got up there to take a class. So what geothermal heat pumps are, they're a piece of equipment that and you can see a couple of them here and here and here, and they are pieces of equipment that take the temperature, an ambient temperature of some sort, whether it's fluid or in the case of air source heat pumps, it'd be air, and they take that and they use the Carnot refrigeration cycle to pump it up from the temperature it is to heat, or to pump it down to a temperature where it cools. Now, you may be wondering, what else uses the Carnot refrigeration cycle? Well, a good example is your refrigerator. A refrigerator has all the components of a car air conditioner, a home air conditioner, or any heat pump. It has a compressor, You can see it plugs in right here. It's got a compressor back here. It's got a condenser. That's what kicks out the heat, and you can feel it on your feet. It's got an evaporator. That's what makes the cooling, and that is what makes the freezer -5 degrees Fahrenheit, and the box 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And so how in the world can you extract heat out of one area and pump it to an area that's as warm or warmer? And that's what the reason for the Carnot refrigeration cycle is. The way it works is kind of like this. This is you've got two geothermal systems here. This is a liquid or a fluid loop. This is a loop that might go down into a borehole in the ground. And as you can see from the arrow here, it's bringing the heat, the relative warmth of the ground up to exchange with the heat pump, where in a standard type heat pump application, the heat pump is extracting that heat from the air. So if you're extracting heat from the air here versus here, which one do you think might have the advantage in the middle of the winter time, the air source or the ground source, and why? Anybody want to chime in on that? I'm talking to the room over there with Orcan. Anybody have an idea why this might be more beneficial, air source versus ground source?
I think the ground source will be more beneficial.
Yes.
It's not exposed.
Exactly. What do you think the average temperature outside in the upper Midwest is, or in Oklahoma, right where you are? What's the temperature in the winter outside for this air source heat pump? What is the coldest temperature you look at during the winter? Do you get down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit? Do you get down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit? Where is it?
10.
10? About 10. So what do you think the temperature is in the ground in Oklahoma?
Depending on the depth.
60, 65, did I hear?
Yes.
You're right. You're right. I can tell you that. That's in that region where between 60 and 65. So imagine working with a heat pump that has a 65-degree energy source in the middle of the winter. Meanwhile, your next door neighbor has an air source heat pump, and he says, mine's an 18 SEER with an HSPF of 22 and a COP of 4. And you go, yeah, well, I don't care how much you paid for it. It's still trying to extract heat from what? From 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of the night, or from 30 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of the day, or 40. And meanwhile, your geothermal heat pump is extracting heat from 65. That is exactly why in the Carnot refrigeration cycle, or in any heat pump cycle, it's better to couple with the ground. We literally have so much free energy in the ground, and we count that as the ground is warmed up in the summer from solar thermal energy, and it's stored from between 6 and to 50 feet down. Actually, the holes are drilled 500 feet down, and this energy goes through a heat exchanger. This is a water to refrigerant heat exchanger that's actually inside of this heat. We'll show you what it looks like in a few minutes. It goes through there, drops off heat at the exchanger. Now it's only 65 or 55 degrees. So it's coming into the compressor after gathering this heat at 60, say it's coming in at 50 degrees. That's still a lot warmer than outside temperature of freezing, say. And so it comes into the compressor, and the compressor does something that you can all relate to. It's taking a cold vapor, relatively cold, 50, 55 degrees, and it's compressing it. Now, what happens when you take 1 cubic foot of air and you compress it to 1/10 the size? What happens to that cubic foot of how is that manifest? Suddenly I have a cubic foot and it's fit into the size of a pint, for example. What is that going to do to that cubic foot of air? What is it going to change in that? Anybody know?
Makes it hotter.
Makes it hotter. Yes, it gets hotter because you haven't added heat to it. But what have you done? You've compressed the heat to a smaller area. So the only way it knows how to manifest itself is at a higher temperature. And so it does that. And if you ever deal with air compressors or so forth, you will see that the supply side of the compressor is air temperature, but the source side is air temperature, but the supply side is much warmer. And that's because of that same thing. And so this compressor compresses this vapor from 50 degrees to 130 degrees Fahrenheit without adding any heat. It has not added a single BTU of heat. Now there is, I'm fibbing a little bit because you do have some heat of compression. What that means is you have mechanical heat because there's friction and so forth. So there's a little bit of electrical mechanical heat that goes in there. And so at any rate, most of the work is done just by compressing the vapor. There's a little bit of mechanical heat. It goes into the heat exchanger for heating the building, and it drops off that heat at 130 degrees or less, which heats the home. That then condenses the refrigerant back into a liquid. It goes through an expansion valve. It flashes back to a gas and drops in temperature drastically where it can pick up more heat. And that's the Carnot refrigeration cycle. Now, how many people, by a show of hands, and I realize there are several online, but how many people by a show of hands have ever, in your studies at Oklahoma, at the University of Oklahoma there, how many of you have studied the Carnot refrigeration cycle, or is this your first expose to it? Have you studied it before? Raise your hand if you have. I can see you in there. Anybody studied it? No, you haven't. So this is not a waste of time. What I'm going to do is, since I've explained this to you, I'm going to show you an actual video of how the Carnot refrigeration cycle works with an air source heat pump in real time. Now, you've got it here, and we're in the summer outdoor, in other words, cooling mode right now. This is an actual heat pump with a reversing valve here, and I'm going to stop it and show you something. This compressor, as we talked about, is putting out a high temperature, high pressure gas. It's going to the outside condenser. Remember me and my summer story in Orlando? It's going to the outside condenser, and that condenser is blowing a fan over that 130 degree high pressure vapor, and it's condensing it because it's cooling it down, just like you can condense steam into liquid. Then see this reversing valve? What's it doing? It's switching from summer to, I'm going to go back just a little bit more so you can watch it, summer to winter. This is the magic of the heat pump. It switches when it gets cold outside, and then look at where the high pressure gas is going. It's no longer going outside, is it? It's been rerouted to the inside. And what does that do for us? It's winter. We need the heat inside. So our inside unit, our inside coil becomes the condenser coil. And so it's now got 130 degree hot gas going to it, and it's trying to heat the indoor space. And as it does, it's going to condense the gas. The gas is going to go through the expansion valve, flash to a very cold vapor, cold liquid, then a cold vapor, which is going to go to the outside air. It's got to get cold enough. Now think about this. In order for an air source heat pump to work, it's got to get cold enough outside to be below the outside temperature. Now, if it's 30 degrees outside, the compressor's got to work hard enough to get that below freezing. And then it's got to use the outside air, that 30 degree air, to actually evaporate this refrigerant. That's why outside evaporators, if you do a study of them, or the next time you go outside and we're coming into winter, you're going to see this, an outside heat pump evaporator freezes up constantly. That's what it's designed to do. It gets so cold, it becomes a block of ice. So every hour or two, it goes through what's called a defrost cycle. It literally takes the hot gas and pumps it out here for a little while to break the ice off of it, to defrost it. And that's a waste of energy. You don't have to do that with the geothermal heat pump, but it's important because I'm teaching you about what these systems do. You are going to have to do that with an air source heat pump, but that's all automatic. So when you hear about air source heat pumps and their defrost cycle, this is what they're doing. And now it's going to switch back to summer again, just to show you how quickly it can switch back and forth. So thank you for taking that little trip with me. That way, do you feel like you understand a little bit better what is happening in this cycle here and what a heat pump does? I see some nodding heads. Good. So now we have removed the outdoor. We've gone to the ground loop. And so now what can we do inside our home or building with geothermal heat pumps? Well, let's look at it. This geothermal heat pump can do forced air heating or cooling. It can do domestic hot water heating. That's called a desuperheater circuit. It can do radiant in-floor heating. It can provide heat for the radiators on the wall. And it can also provide heat for other things you might want to do, like swimming in the summertime or even swimming in the wintertime. One of the beautiful things as you think about this, the waste product of air conditioning in the summertime is that we're going to reject heat back to the ground because we're cooling, we're pulling kWs of energy out of the space and pumping it into the ground. Well, much of that heat can be diverted to the domestic hot water circuit and also to swimming. The swimming pool can become your heat sink for a period of the year. You might think, wow, all I need is a swimming pool. I'm here to tell you, no, that's not all you need. I have a friend, when we first started doing this, had a mansion he installed with a great big swimming pool. We had the ground loops in, but he said, Jay, just divert all my energy to the pool. It's October. We're still air conditioning a little bit. Divert all my energy to the pool. I want it nice and warm. He called me a week later and said, Jay, turn it off. My pool is 120 degrees. Can you imagine? So that's Florida. But in any situation, you have to have an alternate heat sink. The pool will take a lot of it, but it won't take all of it most of the time. So let's talk a little bit more about this. We've already covered that there are generally a few different ways to distribute energy from your heat pump: forced air, radiant, radiators. You can distribute it to a domestic hot water tank. Well, let's understand a little bit about this. In the industry, as you deal with heat pumps, you're going to hear a lot of ways to rate heat pumps. EER, energy efficiency rating, is usually the rating that the industry uses for air conditioning. COP, coefficient of performance, is usually used for heating, but is a very acceptable way of rating both cooling and heating. In my opinion, EER is just a distraction that the industry created to confuse the American public. It is confusing, and you'll see why. It's just a basic equation to do the conversion. You'll understand the thought process in just a minute. Energy efficiency rating is often used for cooling efficiency, and it is the net cooling capacity in BTUs divided by the applied energy in watts. That's mixing units. That's always been a no-no. At least that's how it's been taught to me, but the industry did it. Coefficient of performance is used for heating and cooling efficiency, and it's very simply the BTUs delivered divided by the BTUs consumed, or any unit of measurement, the kilowatts delivered divided by the kilowatts consumed, because it's the same units. So what is the sorcery going on here? What are our BTUs? How does that correlate to watts? Well, first of all, 1 watt of electricity equals 3.412 BTUs. Everybody should know that. If you don't, you do know now. But what is this mysterious BTU? A British thermal unit is the amount of energy one wooden matchstick gives off when you burn it from top to bottom. It's also 1 BTU is the amount of energy it takes to raise 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. So if I were to put 1 BTU into this bottle of water and it was 75 degrees, when I was done, it would be 76 degrees. So if I put 1 watt of water into this bottle, it's going to go from 75 to 78.4. That's the correlation. So when you're talking about EER, EER is simply the coefficient of performance times 3.412. So it's confusing. You know, a unit that has a 3.0 COP is an 1112 EER unit. And you go, but why? It's one COP. So that is one of the things that we in the geothermal industry, we really like to stick to our COPs and kilowatts delivered. We can talk in BTUs and so forth, but here's where the sorcery really gets good. This is excellent for a Halloween sorcery equation here. How do you take 1 kilowatt of electricity and give it to an electric heater and get 17,000 BTUs of heat? You do it like this. 1 kilowatt into an electric heater will give you 3,412 BTUs per hour of heat. 1 kilowatt into a heat pump, since a heat pump is just using that kilowatt of electricity to turn the compressor and run the fans, it uses that 1 kilowatt of energy to pump 4 more kilowatts of energy out of the ground for a grand total of 17,000 BTUs. So that's the magic. Think about a couple of winters ago when Texas just about crashed their grid. They were trying, in many cases, to use 1 kilowatt of electricity to create 1 kilowatt of heat. Well, if they had heat pumps there operating properly, that same kilowatt of electricity would have been quintupled to 17,000 BTUs of heat. Do you think that would have crashed the grid? No. This is the reason, folks, why the federal government and local government is spending so much in subsidies for geothermal technologies. For every dollar we spend on geothermal technologies, implementing thermal energy networks into our society, which is geothermal energy networks, we will save $3. For every dollar in geothermal subsidies, we will save $3 in electrical infrastructure upgrades. Look at it right here. We've got to deliver either enough energy to do, this would be 5 kilowatts to do the same amount of work as the heat pump. So we are absolutely saving the grid using this technology, and the federal government and local government entities understand that. That's why geothermal heat pumps are becoming all the rage. People that are on the line, I see Garen Eubank online. He's one of the old timers, even older than I am. And we've been preaching this for a half a century, and now it's finally taking hold. It's this versus this. And not only is the heat pump all inside a better idea, but it has a lot of benefits that we might not be thinking about, which we're going to cover. The first one is you eliminate outside equipment. Everything that is in these two pieces of equipment right here is included in the single unit you see here. The compressor is below, and the air handler that moves the air is above. And then, of course, the controls and so forth are in there. So the only thing that's missing really is the fan to move air is replaced with the circulator that moves the fluid, and it uses about 1/10 the energy of the fan to move the fluid through the circuit. And every major manufacturer has more different types of extended range geothermal heat pumps than you probably care to go through, whether they're vertical, horizontal, stackable GHPs like you would see in hotels and apartments, modular like you would see in less expensive hotels and apartments, dedicated pool heat pumps, dedicated domestic hot water heat pumps, whatever the situation, you're going to find it. And as we grow in our consideration of this, this is what's going on in the United States today is skilled trades are being massively increased presently, whether it's drillers, pipe fitters. We have so much going on with the nation's pipe fitters right now because we're having to pipe energy through our cities to get to this massive number of new heat pumps. It's like Mayor Dunt said, who was the mayor of West Union, Iowa from 1998 to 2011, one of the first master planned thermal energy networks in the country. He said, as long as we are tearing up the streets and sidewalks to put in new water mains, we might as well improve the energy infrastructure and put in a thermal energy network at the same time. And they did. This is what, and think about the IRA and the infrastructure package. We are in the process of separating sewer mains from wastewater mains. In other words, I should say rainwater mains from wastewater mains. I'm sorry, the yucky stuff from the regular runoff. We're in the process of upgrading our water pipes, because some of the old water pipes are just have lead in them, and they have their problems. So at the same time as we're doing this infrastructure, we're able to do this and stub these into, just like the natural gas network did in the 50s and 60s. As a matter of fact, just for a little trivia, this always gets people's attention. Did you know that our former president, Ronald Reagan, in the 1950s was a spokesman for the National Electric Manufacturers Association in the Live Better Electrically move? And this happened just as the natural gas manufacturers and deliverers were putting in natural gas mains like crazy throughout the cities in the United States. Actually, during the 50s and 60s, the natural gas suppliers of the United States installed more than 2.5 million miles of natural gas pipeline under the streets of our existing cities, and supplied those to 40 million buildings. So when you see things like this, we've already done it, folks. We did it in the 50s and 60s, and we're going to do it again. When I say that, we tried to go electric once. We even made these cool medallions that homes got, and door knockers that said, "Live better electrically. This is a total electric home," and they would get these medallions. And the industry is working on something similar for electrification. And as a matter of fact, if you go to Boise, Idaho, you can see plaques on the walls there. They've been geothermal, hot geothermal for quite some time. This is just to prove out slide, just to prove out what I showed you in the electrical consumption of air source heat pumps versus geothermal heat pumps. Because the ASHRAE building headquarters, the ASHRAE headquarters in Atlanta in 2010 said, well, let's put rubber to the road. Let's put this to the test. Let's do air source heat pumps on the first floor. Let's do geothermal heat pumps on the second floor. This is what they got out of it. Instrumented the heck out of it. Of course, it's ASHRAE. What else would they do? They wanted to make it a living laboratory. The geothermal heat pumps are obviously going to be more efficient. How much more efficient is in relationship to how much cooler the ground is than the air. So in the summertime, it's this much more efficient than air source heat pumps. But what happens in the wintertime? Just like we saw in Texas, just like we saw in that slide where I showed you 1 kilowatt into an electric heater will give you 3,412 BTUs. 1 kilowatt into a geothermal heat pump will give you 5 times that. So our air source heat pumps in red here are crashing the local grid as we speak. In other words, they're using way more energy than the geothermal heat pumps. And here's something I want you to notice. This is why it's so important. Whatever energy we need for cooling in a building will likely be more than the peak energy we will need for heating. So our electric infrastructure that is existing now will work for wintertime heating, with the exceptions that we might not see. But this is what we said. This is what I've seen for the last 40 years in every installation. Heating's the cinch. Cooling is usually the thing where we're most close. But whatever your cooling load is usually surpassing your heating peak load. This is from the tale of two buildings that Climate Master did in Oklahoma in the early 2000s. They had 2 identical office buildings. one with air source heat pumps and one with geothermal heat pumps. Look at that load profile. Wow. Not even a compare. You can see it's kind of like exaggerating right here in July. You see it getting close, kind of like what you saw here. But that's the only time they ever even get near each other. This is the middle of the winter here. And look where those air source heat pumps took them. So this is a slide that Ontario did under the pay and guidance of HRAI. It was done by Dunsky in about 2020, I believe. And what they did was they said, okay, let's turn off the natural gas. We're giving the whole province of Ontario air source heat pumps, or we're giving them ground source heat pumps. What would happen in each of those scenarios? Well, the first thing that happens is they save $1.16 billion. Or no, I'm saying $1.16 trillion in fuel costs for natural gas. They turned it off. It's savings. Okay. How are they going to get heat pumps in every home in Ontario? Well, they're going to have to subsidize it because not everybody has enough money. So for air source heat pumps, you can see here, this is 100% air source adoption. This is 100% geothermal adoption. The air source heat pumps, they estimate they'd have to subsidize that to the tune of 435 billion, 572 billion, 137 billion more for geothermal. Suddenly, you know, that doesn't look that much more there. You know, it's when you're looking at the big picture, but still it's more. 137 billion is not chicken scratch. I mean, what did Lusk buy Twitter for? Like 40 billion? He could just about do that just with another purchase, right? At any rate, the electricity cost they estimated, which I think this is flawed. I think it's much better, but still they showed $137 billion savings on the geothermal heat pump side. But this is where the rubber hits the road. Reduced power infrastructure. In other words, they would have to spend $1 trillion upgrading their infrastructure if they did air source heat pumps, only 584 billion. And you might say, why would they even have to do that if it uses less energy? I don't know. I didn't do the study. I estimate it's probably they are figuring all the electric cars and everything, but they have that. But the fact of the matter is they just saved $500 billion by spending 137 billion. You see why they're doing it? And this is what the governments of North America and the world are looking at all over. If you have the right kind of building, well, even if you don't, if you have most buildings have a cooling tower, office buildings or commercial buildings have a cooling tower and a boiler. And they oftentimes will have they'll either have a central chiller heat pump system or distributed heat pumps like this. With distributed heat pumps, those are your low-hanging fruit because we can turn off the cooling tower, we can turn off the boiler, and we can connect that building to a thermal energy network very easily. The same thing is true with a chiller. However, if the chiller is only designed for cooling of the building, we might need to add a chiller heat pump to handle the heating load, right? So that's what the thermal energy network is designed to do. Turn off the boilers, turn off the combustion heating, eliminate the cooling towers. By the way, cooling tower use, you don't deal with it there so much. Well, maybe you do. There are a lot of drought stressed areas in the United States. As a matter of fact, FYI, in Nevada in 2024, these things are outlawed for new construction. Outdoor evaporative cooling towers are no longer allowed. Very busy time for the geothermal business right now in Nevada because anything going in has to either be a dry cooler or something else like a geothermal system. In addition to that, what do you think the world is going to look like if we just tell everybody, yeah, air source heat pumps are good enough. Yeah, go ahead and throw them on. What do you think that's going to look like in your high rises and so forth? It's not pretty. This is what happens because air source heat pumps are considered appliances. Even though it requires a license in most states to install an air source heat pump, think about this for just a minute. If you buy a window unit from Lowe's or Home Depot, do you need a license to do that? Can you buy a window heat pump from Lowe's or Home Depot? Yes, you can. These are mini splits, so they have a refrigerant line that goes into the inside that does the cooling or heating. This is by far the most common type of heat pump going in right now. It's just that they're not going into code very often, because how do appliance installers make their money? By installing it fast, quick, and in a hurry, getting their $5,000, $2,000 in their pocket, $3,000 in their pocket, and they're down the road. This guy, I love that they put the extension ladder there, but I would not want to be the one replacing a fan motor right about here. I just got to tell you, that just gives me heebie-jeebies just even looking at it. So this is another reason why thermal energy networks are such a big thing in the US. The wholesale installation of air source heat pumps is not sustainable. Geothermal heat pumps are the answer. If you look at the pipelines that go in, think about a natural gas pipeline. It's a pipe in the ground, often plastic, often yellow in color, made out of high-density polyethylene. Have you, by a show of hands, how many of you have seen in the conference room there a yellow natural gas pipeline? Have you seen that? Ever seen one of those? Okay. The interesting thing about this is, think about that and replace it with a black pipeline. A black pipeline that says geothermal on it. Whether you're doing a geothermal system or a natural gas system, the infrastructure is the same. It's a pipe in the ground. What's different is the utilization technology. Are you using a furnace or a boiler? If it's natural gas, you are. Are you using a heat pump? If it's a geothermal energy network, yes, you are. And you get heating and cooling as a functional output, not just heating only, as is the case with natural gas. And then this gets really interesting here. Where's your energy coming from? With a geothermal system, it's right there. You are mining energy from your own property. And it's sustainable and renewable because it's really solar energy, or it's the energy in the ground, the shallow earth. In this case, you're having to pull in natural gas. Where's that coming from? In Oklahoma, right there. Does anybody know where your natural gas comes from for your neighborhoods? Anybody? I mean, I don't know. Does anybody there know how far you have to pipe it to get it there? Do you have local natural gas wells that provide it or not?
Yeah, there's local natural gas. I mean, we have natural gas fields in Oklahoma and natural gas plants within Oklahoma that provide. Relative to other states, it's shorter relatively to like other states that use natural gas.
So if we can pipe natural gas miles and miles, dozens of miles, hundreds of miles, do you think we can repipe local cities with local energy, where we don't need anything from outside the city, where we have more than enough heat for the city? I think we can. Take a look at this. So in a regular city, each building has their individual heat pumps, right? Their individual chillers, their individual whatever type of heat pump they're using to do it. Some buildings are heat makers in the wintertime. Some of those buildings might be data centers, office buildings, and the like, and they're putting red out into the thermal energy network. A thermal energy network is just a thermal energy transportation loop that moves energy from building to building. And it's called an ambient temperature loop because it fluctuates with ambient conditions. It's underground, and what happens is, say it's a 60-degree ambient temperature loop at natural temperatures. This data center is going to be pumping out. Data centers are rated in megawatts, as you probably know. It's not uncommon to have a data center that's 50 megawatts. So that means if you hear the term a 50 megawatt or 120 megawatt data center, That is how much energy it puts out continually or is rated to put out at peak. That's a lot of freaking heat, right? That is a very common size for a data center, 50 megawatts. How much energy do you think it would take to heat a complex about this size? This is 3,000 apartments, 5 blocks in downtown Manhattan. 3,000 families live here on 5 blocks. They have a central energy plant right here. Anybody have any idea how many megawatts it takes to heat 3,000 families? Take a wild guess. Somebody throw out a number.
10.
10. Very close. I think you, if we were here, I'd be giving you a Snickers bar for answering so close. They are a 5 megawatt load in the middle of the winter at peak. So you were twice that. You were using a safety factor, right? If this was Price is Right, I guess you would have gone over. So they would do the bump, 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 bump. But I like it. I think you did good. So 5 megawatts of energy they need for this apartment complex. I just told you that an average data center is an average size is 50 megawatts. So I got a question for you, for all of us. Why are we wasting energy out the top of buildings with cooling towers when we should be piping it into a thermal energy network and dropping it off at the apartment buildings so they can turn off all their furnaces and use the heat from their new heat pumps that are now installed in their buildings? That's the genius of thermal energy networks and heat pump technology. So you have this one giving off energy, this one needing energy, this one giving off energy. What is this? A surface water energy transfer station? What does surface water do? It's a great heat sink. It gets rid of heat in the summertime. It's also a great heat source in the wintertime if you go down deep enough. Energy exchange facilities, mixed use buildings, residential, multifamily, pools, water parks, recreational facilities. You've got all these things. You've got wastewater energy. Did you know that wastewater energy transfer is stable year round? The wastewater, the energy coming out of our buildings through our wastewater, even if it's minus 40 outside, is going to be 60 to 75 degrees. Do you think we're wasting energy if we don't extract heat from wastewater? We are. Wastewater can provide up to 40% of the heating needs of our buildings and a great deal of our cooling needs. You go, cooling too? How's that? It's 60 to 75 degrees. Even if it's 115 outside, it's still 75 degrees coming out of the building. Why? Think about it. I'm in my house right now, and if it were 115 degrees outside, the water in my taps is all still coming out at roughly room temperature. My toilets are flushing, my dishwasher is running, my shower is running. It's going to be roughly the average temperature about 75 degrees going out, even in the middle of summer. That is a huge heat sink. We can dump a lot of BTUs into wastewater going out from our heat pumps. We can dump it into surface water. And if all else fails, we dump it into the ground. That's what geothermal is all about. We can dump a tremendous amount of heat into the aquifers. So as we can see, we're running at about 17 minutes left, and I have a lot more to cover, but I want you to know, I'm going to point out a couple of things. All of what we're talking about is codified, and we are working on the codes for the next generation of thermal energy networks. In the Uniform Mechanical Code, there's already a 2024 edition. This one also had geothermal. You can see the very first code was the 2015 Uniform Solar Hydronics and Geothermal Code. And then the ANSI CSA C448 is being updated presently and has a very good construction description of how all the different types of geothermal systems go in, whether it's surface water, standing column, open loop, closed loop. All of the different types of heat transfer are covered in this CSA manual. And by the way, I am going to send this copy of this presentation to Orcon after we're done, so you guys can use the hyperlinks and the pictures any way you want. We're also very focused on the rising generation. We have a kids corner. We have a kids corner page that features some of our free works that you can download online. Includes some of the new books that come out. A company out of Sweden just came out with our Hidden Powers. It is a magnificent. We bought 500 copies of this, and we give them away everywhere we go because it has such a cool take on all of the renewables. So as we get ready to wind this down, I want to cover this. No matter what type of source of energy you have, you can put all those together, pipe them into a community, and look at this. I just want to put supply and injection wells, closed loop wells, surface water, wastewater treatment plants, any other type of infrastructure can be tied together as a heat source and a heat sink for thermal energy transfer systems that run through buildings and run through communities and provide this heat exchange. Now, what I would like to know is, as we're going through this, is are we understanding how these pipelines are a renewable way to replace or at least peacefully coexist with any needed natural gas? Does it make sense? You guys getting that? Are you getting how these can replace the way that the industry started was the one-off systems like this. Each building is an island, and that's great. And universities forever have been, campuses have been combining these loops. But most of the time, residentially, it's that property line thing. But who can circumvent property lines? Who can go an inch over a property line into the neighbors without anybody complaining? The electric company, the water company, the sewer, the gas. So it's dependent upon getting utilities involved to make this happen, because when we do get utilities involved, then the networks can go in. And what you're seeing here is a tap off of a thermal energy network that can handle a building 300 to 400 tons of capacity. That's the size of a small elementary school, right? So you do these systems, and meanwhile, we have, what is this? Our aging natural gas system. Currently, the reason this really, really got started, at least, and I've been in the industry 35 years, but when a company in Massachusetts, a .org, started, they noticed that in Massachusetts, the gas company was asking for a subsidy of $9 billion. And the question, of course, is why do you need $9 billion? They said, because our natural gas system is leaking like a sieve, and we need to fix it. And so a watchdog group, Mothers Out Front, and the home energy efficiency team got involved, and they said, yeah, look at those methane leaks. Holy crap. But why are you going to spend $9 billion fixing natural gas? Wouldn't that be a stranded asset? Well, yes. We're putting in something. If they were to fund $9 billion of natural gas pipelines, they would be funding something that would be illegal to use before its natural life was completed. So instead, they started saying, what about this? What about we start putting in these, we start paring back the natural gas pipelines and make one street at a time its own thermal energy network, and get folks switching from natural gas to geothermal. Well, they did it, and they got the attention, and now these are not of Massachusetts. It's just other examples of geothermal systems. By the way, these 442-inch lines, in case you don't know, I don't know how you would unless you've been to one of my presentations before, but they serve the New World Trade Center, connected to the Hudson as a heat sink. So doing these, they're paring it back, and actually in Massachusetts, I don't know if I have these pictures here. Let's see if I added them. Nope, I didn't yet. I've got some great new video. They're installing They actually have the network installed, the first network installed in Massachusetts. It's beautiful. It's coming together well. It's basically, it's not reverse return, it's single pipe. I don't know if you even know what I'm talking about there, but it's basically a system that is able to take, and this is the way we try to make it. I think like a fifth grader. My mind is basically stuck at 10 years old. So that's why if you notice a lot of pictures, that's because that's the way I understand things. And I like to tell people in this image from Chicago, look at all this. This is just steam. This is just heat rising from the cooling towers on a cold, clear January morning. Yes, that's the Sears Tower. And look at all that steam. We can take that energy, pipe it across the street, around the block to the apartment buildings where they are facing, what do we call it? We call it energy poverty. People who are barely making a living wage are spending $300 and $400 a month for natural gas or for heating oil. It can be practically free. As a matter of fact, in the case of this, do you know where we got the 5 megawatts? Has anybody sat through this presentation before? All right. We found the 5 megawatts that they needed. One of the challenges here when we got this project from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority was Egg Geo or anybody. How can you get us 5 megawatts of energy to this? And I'm just stating this as one problem out of 900,000. How can you get 5 megawatts of energy into Manhattan, into this apartment complex without drilling? Now, 5 megawatts of energy, each megawatt is worth about 284 tons. So each borehole can do 2 to 3 tons of heat exchange. Can anybody do math real quick and tell me how many boreholes, geothermal boreholes, it would take to do 5 megawatts? Thousands, right? Each megawatt is 284 tons. It's 5 megawatts. It's at least, I'm just doing it's 1,500 at least, right? So there, first of all, there's a little green space here, but I doubt there's enough for 1,500 boreholes. So they said, find the heat somewhere else. This building across the street is the US Postal Service. It's the sorting station for Manhattan. We went and talked to them, and we got the ratings on their chillers, and we found that because of their on-site data, on-site equipment, on-site hundreds of employees, you want to guess how much energy they exhaust in the middle of the winter through their cooling towers? On the coldest day of the winter, 8 megawatts. 8 megawatts is going up through the cooling tower. So we said, what if we pipe the energy from those cooling towers over to the central energy plant here and put in a heat pump chiller that can handle the load that the 5 megawatt boiler is doing now? They said, bravo, let's do it. And they awarded the contract. Now, this is part of a community heat pump project. So we also pulled in the State University of New York Fashion Institute of Technology here, a couple of public schools. We've now got Amtrak involved. We've now got Penn Station involved. So it's grown to about 20 million square feet. We may even make it all the way to the Hudson over here where the Javits Center is, as people keep asking to get pulled onto this thing. So with that, I'll share a really simple, this is one of our first examples of why heat pumps are so amazing, and especially geothermal heat pumps. First of all, you got to understand that with an average heat pump, you're exhausting heat never to be reused. It's usually going out through this outside condenser that you know what it looks like. But with a geothermal heat pump, what can we do? Well, in the middle of the summer or the middle of the winter, when we got our computers running, our blow dryers on, people are bathing, you're cooking, you're cooling the place and you're absorbing all this heat into the geothermal heat pump, and it's rejecting it out into the domestic hot water tank. And get this, it can also reject it into your pool if you have a pool, and all that before you even dump it down into your geothermal resource. when you look at it in a big way, like a resort, and this is from our first book with McGraw-Hill, it shows how here's your geothermal resource and here's your exchanger. If you have a 70-degree Fahrenheit condenser water loop running through this resort, the hotel rooms in the middle of the summer are going to add heat to that because they're cooling the spaces. So that 70 degrees becomes 80 degrees. That's the effect of cooling. You're rejecting heat. The ice machines on each floor reject another 5 degrees of energy into this condenser water loop. So now it's gone from 70 to 80 to 85. It's going to be running away soon, right? It's going to get too hot to use. By the way, in case you don't know, extended range heat pumps can use up to 110, even warmer condenser water. So our bandwidth is about 25 degrees on the low side to about 110 on the high side. So then we go through the common area units. We add another 5 degrees, and now we're up to 90 degrees. But there is relief in sight. We're going through the domestic hot water heat pumps now for the laundry facilities, for the hotel rooms, for everything. It saps a quick 10 degrees off this condenser water loop. By the time you do the great big resort pools and everything, you're down to 70 degrees. Now, what happens if it's 70 here and 70 here? What have we just done? We're sharing energy. This is called load diversity. This is what we've been missing in the world today. Load diversity at an urban scale. And that's what geothermal heat pumps allow you to do. So I'll give you just an example. At Stanford, they realized their cooling energy above the line here, their heating energy below the line here. They found out that if they shared energy just like we showed right here, they would be able to, this whole yellow area would be non-consumptive, just sharing energy. Isn't that flippin' amazing? What does that do for the efficiency of heat pumps? When one heat pump, like this heat pump, is feeding the domestic hot water heat pump or the pool heat pump, they go from 3 or 4 COP to 9 or 10 COP. They are sharing energy. It's like two people cuddling together in bed. It's just better that way, right? They are able to be more efficient, and that's what heat pumps do. If they're working together, they can do this. And what happens is the heating heat pumps feed the cooling heat pumps. The boiler and cooling tower can be eliminated and be replaced with a thermal energy loop. And that just looks like this. This is a thermal energy network running through a city right here. And it's using, and I know this is really small, but it says domestic supply, dewatering operations, subway, and so forth, all going through these multitude of exchangers and providing a stabilizing thermal energy resource for our cities and communities. So that's what we're here today to talk about, and I hope that's what you learned. By the way, I want to show you something. We talked about these massive, this is a data center, a Facebook data center, 120 megawatts. 120, now you remember, 5 stories, 3,000 families can be heated from how much? 5 megawatts? This is 120 megawatts. What could you do with that? These are everywhere. Now, sometimes the everywhere is in the mountains of Wyoming. So in the case of the mountains of Wyoming, this 120 megawatt hyperscale data center is building Wyoming hyperscale indoor farms. Guess what they're doing with that? Once again, we're getting into sustainability. Wyoming gets all of its fresh fruit and vegetables from where? California. Well, now they can relieve drought-stressed California and have multiple growing seasons a year as a byproduct of wastewater, of waste energy reuse. So it's just an example of how just one of the small pocket of things that can make a difference. And I'll leave you with that. We've been at this a long time. That's my granddaddy and his wife. there in Egg Plumbing, Soda Springs, Idaho, 1930s, 1940s. We kind of kept the trades going. So you can say we've been doing this a long time. And I'll leave you with that. And I left actually 4 minutes for questions. Hopefully that isn't too little.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. You know, this presentation is so nice. Also, the cartoons. Actually, we have some internal discussions about how heat pumps can be applied and used. And it was good that you answered some of those questions. You know, so you removed a lot of questions that I have for you because you already addressed those during your presentation. So thank you so much. So I have okay this.
Put the microphone closer to your face, Orkan. I'm having a little trouble, but I am hearing you.
Oh yes. Okay.
Keep
Okay.
going.
Can you hear us better?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So one question is related to this community network. You know, we want to and we like the idea to combine reusing things, and we are thinking about using existing oil and gas wells. You know, those oil and gas wells can reach deeper depths and probably reach a little bit higher temperature. So, do you see any utility of reusing oil and gas infrastructure and integrate that into a model that network that you are showing? Okay, that the network that you are showing in this moment in the cartoon that you are placing now?
Yes. In the situation where we're using existing oil and gas wells, this is the last presentation I just gave, we use what's called downhole exchangers. This is a tube and shell exchanger that goes down into the oil and gas well. And if it's spec'd this way, we will have a submersible high temperature pump, which forces the briny, nasty fluid down there through the exchanger. And then this is closed loop and can extract the energy, the high temperature energy or whatever. Now, what we didn't have time to cover today is if the temperature is above 158 degrees Fahrenheit and constant, we can use that energy to feed an absorption chiller. In other words, we can get all the cooling you need from waste heat if it's above 158 degrees. Absorption chiller technology, another presentation we'd be glad to give to you. We have an hour presentation on that. Allows anybody who has harvested energy from a high temperature resource to get all the cooling and of course heating, which goes without saying they need.
Okay.
So this is called downhole exchanger technology, an excellent technology. As a matter of fact, we're working on several of these throughout the world. A project in Hawaii, a project in Reno, a project in Southern California, all doing downhole exchangers for basically deep direct use wells that are worthless otherwise.
Okay, and thinking about those downhole exchangers, what is an ideal depth? You know, a depth that gives some efficiency, or in other words, what is the expected downhole temperature that increase the efficiency of applying these downhole heat exchangers?
If somebody tells me they have 80 to 90 degrees downhole and there's fluid present, that's unlimited cooling capability to me, as long as you can get the GPM out of it.
Okay, and in that case, how much considering in terms of efficiency, of how much percentage we expect it to have? Let's say that we have 100 Fahrenheit degrees downhole. Sorry, 100 Fahrenheit degrees. So how much temperature you expect to have a surface, having with a system like this?
Okay, when I'm alternating between Fahrenheit and Celsius. When I said 80 to 90, I meant Celsius, 176 to 194 Fahrenheit. What we have to start our absorption heating capabilities at about 75 C or 167 Fahrenheit. And that's the start of where absorption machines work. As far as deep direct use, we can use anything above, if you figure you've got 120, 130 degrees Fahrenheit downhole, that's a great resource, and you can heat spaces all day with that. A downhole exchanger would be excellent for that, and then we would just do cooling another way. I'm just pointing out that if the heat gets above that 160 Fahrenheit threshold, you can also do cooling with it. Where if the temperature of the resource is cool enough, obviously you can do cooling with it anyway. And that's part of what an initial scoping study will tell you. But you guys can drop me an email anytime and give me a scenario, and I will give you a kind of an answer on what would be best applied there.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, guys, if any one of you have additional questions.
Can you hear me? This is Jamal. I have a question.
Hi, Jamal. I can.
Yes. Jay, again, this is a hypothetical situation. Assuming everyone is switching to ground source heat pump, do we think that due to system is not, the Carnot cycle is not 100% efficiency? So should we expecting that the temperature distribution, if everyone, assuming, in a neighborhood, everyone is using a heat pump, could we expecting that the efficiency will not be the same as the day one that only one house put the heat pump? In other words, in terms of heat transfer, everyone is using the downhole source of energy, and so we are wasting part of it, and we may go deeper every time, or we have to go deeper every time.
And that's an interesting question. When we model these, we usually model the influence in the aquifer out with a digital twin model out 20 or 30 years to determine what the residuals are. And
Okay.
it gives us that's something we haven't always done, but in the last 10 years, it's become very important because a lot of jurisdictions want to mitigate your thermal influence on the neighbors, right?
Uh-huh.
So we do this on every commercial project now. We look at, and the industry does, I shouldn't say, when I say we, I'm speaking of the industry for the most part, does this on pretty much every project now, because you have to know what kind of thermal influence you're having on the aquifer and how quickly it will dissipate. So yes, your question is very valid. In a whole neighborhood, like you're seeing, right, like in this, this is an apartment complex, but you might wonder if there's 300 apartments here, what's going to happen, what's on the first one, what's at the end of the line, and we have to model that, and the answer is not as easy as you might like. It's a scientific answer. We model it, we look at it, we tell them this is the maximum temperature you're going to see over the next 30 years, and this is the minimum temperature. And we make sure we're within the specs and the bandwidth of the heat pumps, which, as I mentioned before, it's kind of cool because the heat pumps that are made for geothermal technology are just water source extended range heat pumps. And extended range means that instead of operating from 40 to 95 degrees, which is where heat pumps, cooling tower boiler connected heat pumps are designed to operate, they operate from below freezing, 20 or 25 degrees, to 110 or even 120 degrees. If the condenser water source or the geothermal source is between 25 and 120, they're good. And if you think about standard heat pumps, they all operate under those conditions anyway, very effectively. I mean, I live in Phoenix, and the average daily temperature was 118 degrees last summer, at least for the month of August. And all the heat pumps work. That's what they operate at. So same with cold heat pumps. It's very easy to get a heat pump that can extract heat out of sub-zero air. It's just the efficiency. That's where the geothermal heat pumps really shine, because they're always going to be extracting energy from something in the neighborhood of the very least 25 degrees Fahrenheit, but often more like 40, 45, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think that we just run out of time, but thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jay. You know, this presentation was really, really good, and thank you so much for allowing us to record this. I think we are going over this, and also, you know, probably we are going to reach you out by email. But thank you so much for offering us your knowledge, and you know.
I will be sending you this PowerPoint immediately, directly via email. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
everybody. Thank you, Oklahoma. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.